Kind of having fun with this. I do have, you've got a handout and it's going to follow along. I do have an educational piece. Said, you asked what? Avoiding illegal interview questions. The nifty thing about this, and I'll put these in the back, so it's got a chart of how to ask legal interview questions. So if there's information you want, and you want to ask the question, you can ask some questions, they just can't be illegal questions, okay? Can you guys, oh, it's on your thing. I thought that was funny. I like the pointy-haired boss. So, let's just start right off. Nationality. You can't say, are you a U.S. citizen? It seems like a simple, direct question, but you can say, are you authorized to work in the United States? Oh, one of the things that we need to talk about is, do folks who are doing interviewing for the county, do they understand how to do legal interviews? No. Yeah. So, I think one of the things that the county can do at some point, or somebody needs to take this responsibility on, is to help them understand how interviews are going to be done, that they'll be formatted, there'll be same questions to all applicants, so that you can help them avoid some of these pitfalls. And I'm going to tell you a true life story in one of these, okay? So if you have people who are interviewing, you need to make sure that they're folks who are qualified, and I mean legally qualified, to do interviews. It's not just sitting in front of somebody and deciding, yeah, I like them. You can't ask, what's your native tongue? If you want to find out about fluency in other languages, you say, what languages do you read, speak, or write fluently? I don't know. A lot of you ask, do you want? I'm sure, cool. So just don't say, where are you from? Where'd you learn that? You can't ask, how long have you lived here? Even if familiarity with the local area could be important in the position, like that you're going to work for a highway department and you want them to know how to get around, you can't ask that. You can say, what's your current address and phone number? Do you have alternative locations? But you could ask, would you be able to drive our county's highways? You just have to avoid that because it can lead to a residency issue. Age. It's important you don't make assumptions about a candidate's ability or lack of ability based on age. So you can't ask, how old are you? Seems like a simple question. You could say, to do this job, we need everybody to be over the age of 18 or whatever requirement there is. Hang on. Oh, this one. This is a real story. How much longer do you plan to work before you retire? So a commissioner was hiring for a county position, and he had two really qualified applicants. Both of them had their engineering background and lots of good credentials. And the commissioner said to only the older applicant, so how long do you plan on working? The older applicant didn't get selected. He filed a claim and said, I was discriminated against because of my age. And actually, I think that's funny because how often are you hearing about the younger generation that keeps skipping jobs anyway? So hiring somebody in who's younger doesn't mean they're going to be there for the next 25 years anyway. I think go with the best applicant and worry about it all later. You can say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your long-term career goals? If they say, I see myself in 2 years sitting on a chair in the Caribbean cashing my pension checks, then maybe you could go with somebody else. But don't ask them how old they are, how long they're going to work. Don't ask, is this your maiden name? Marital status isn't something that's required to be shared with employers, all right? You could say, have you worked or earned a degree under another name if you're background checking? You can't ask, so you're concerned about family obligations getting in the way of work hours. You can't ask, do you have kids? How many do you have? Do you plan to have kids? When are you going to start your family? What are your child care arrangements? Who watches your kids? Your mother? Are you pregnant? Who do you live with? None of those, okay? In fact, I've heard defense counsel say you should be careful when an applicant volunteers too much personal information. You want to steer them away from that, because the fact that they disclosed it to you could be discriminated. You could have discriminated even if they voluntarily told you that. So if they start telling you a whole bunch of stuff, you could have red flags go up, but maybe you want to steer that conversation away from some of the things that they're talking about. You can say, are you available to work overtime on occasion? Can you travel? Sometimes we have to work on short notice. Is this going to be a problem for you? Let's say you have a position and work experience with kids would be desirable. You don't say, do you have kids? You can say, what is your experience working with age group 2 to 7? They're going to be after school care or something. You can't ask, what do your parents do for a living? Sure, that can reveal a lot, but I don't know how much of it's going to be appropriate to you. You can say, tell me how you became interested in our industry, or why do you want to work for the county? And if they say, oh, my family has worked for the county, we find it easy to embezzle from them. You can't say, if you get pregnant, will you continue to work or will you come back after maternity leave? Again, back to what are your long-term career goals? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Religion is really not something that goes over well in an employment setting. You don't need to talk a lot about that. So you want to protect yourself from overstepping your boundaries, but maybe you want to get appropriate work-related information. So instead of saying, what's your religion, and you want to know about weekend availability, you can say, what days are you available to work? You could say, this job requires weekend work. Can you meet our job requirements? You can't say, what religious holidays do you observe? I'm going to say all of them. All of them. I don't discriminate. So scheduling is important, but you can't risk stepping on toes, but you need to find out. So you want to just confirm with the interviewee that they can work when you need them to work. So you can say, here, our job schedule is this, or can you work our required schedule? You can't say, what clubs do you belong to? What social organizations do you belong to? Are you with the Women's League? Are you in the Knights of Columbus? Can't ask those. They can reveal things about political affiliations, religious affiliations. It also has little to no relation about a job. You could say, are you a member of a professional or trade group that's relevant to our industry? You could ask questions like, can you tell me an experience you had working with groups of people that would bear on how you would work well in our team or with our group? And they could say, oh, I was on such and such a committee. Here's an interesting one. We always had a man or a woman do this job. How do you think you'll stack up? Gender shouldn't be part of the question. So this goes back to the job descriptions that they spoke about earlier, which talks about the requirements needed to do the job. And none of those requirements should be gender specific. So if somebody can lift the manhole covers, they can lift the manhole covers. You can say, what do you have to offer our county? Leave gender out. How do you feel about supervising men? How do you feel about supervising women? No. Tell me about your experience managing teams. Same could be said, how do you feel about working for a man or working for a woman? What do you think of inter-office dating? And what are you doing Saturday night? You can't ask those questions. You don't want to get into marital status. Have you been disciplined for behavior at work? How well do you get along with teams? So you want healthy employees. You want people that can show up on a regular basis. You want them to be able to get the job done, but you don't want to make assumptions and you don't want to discriminate. So you can't ask, do you smoke? Do you drink? If someone comes in, they're a little heavy. You go, you like to eat? You can say, we have strict policies on no smoking in our vehicles, in our county vehicles, or these are the policies we have. Have you ever had a problem with that in a previous employer before? You can't say, how many sick days did you take at your last job? But you can say, regular attendance is an essential function of the job. Will you be able to meet this requirement? You don't want to ask, do you have any disabilities? How about mental health issues? Have you had any recent illnesses or operations? When was your last medical exam? Tell me about your family's health. Disabilities, whether physical or mental, can affect a candidate's ability to do the job, but it's critical you avoid asking about them. You want to find out if the applicant can do what is required of the job. So you can say, are you able to perform essential functions of this job with or without reasonable accommodations? You can't ask, how tall are you? Let's say you would think, oh, it'd be really great if we could get somebody that could always reach up and do that stuff. You just say, are you able to perform the essential functions of the job? Are you in good health? How much do you weigh? Don't do that. Don't ask those. Instead, you would say, are you able to lift boxes weighing up to 50 pounds if that was a job requirement? Are you able to perform essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodations? You're looking at targeted, specific, work-related performance questions. Have you ever been arrested? Even in sensitive positions that deal with money, you might want to find out about candidates' legal fortitude, but you can ask instead, have you ever been convicted of X, fraud, theft, and so on? Only if those questions are relevant and it's legal to do so. Were you honorably discharged from the military? You can say, I see that you have military experience. Can you tell us what we can benefit from you working for the county? What did you learn? Don't know why this is goofing up. Your questions are aimed to find out if the applicant has the necessary skills to do the job, if their experience fits with what you require of them, if they can work under the specific pressures of the job, and how well they're going to fit in with your county and with that particular team. So some other tips. Experts, so legal counsel says, be careful about writing specifically things on an application or a resume. I'd go a little further and say be careful about the things that you note at all. You should use a form to take notes, and that form should be the same for every applicant, but you don't want to write things that are discriminatory on a resume or on an application. You might want to note, oh, answered this question well, or good response to whatever. Those are totally appropriate notes. Stay away from things like, I don't know, horrible stuff.
He looks old.
He looks old. Thank you. Yeah. He what? He has long hair. Yeah. He's an idiot. That you can say. That came from the panel. It should be done for all applicants. You don't want to make notes about physical characteristics or appearance on an applicant because of potential legal liability. So, anyone conducting interviews should be aware of the legal issues related to interviews, as well as how to conduct a good interview. So the commissioner who got caught in that how long are you going to work thing, he had no negative intent. He thought if they were going to hire this job, he wanted somebody that would do it for a while, and they just wouldn't have to hire somebody again for a while. He felt that the question he was asking was totally appropriate. And boom, yes.
I have two questions. One, what about things like invisible tattoos, like facial tattoos? And two, required prayer. There are certain types of religions that require prayer during the day. And how does policy address that legally? Repeat the question.
Okay. The first question was about
Visible tattoos.
visible tattoos. I love them.
No, what? No, but I'm just saying, I know that you can discriminate, but can you note that or can you not note that? I mean,
So I was talking with an attorney, and I was saying, so let's say somebody comes in, and his scenario was they're picking their nose, they're passing gas, they're burping, and you say, this is not professional. This is not appropriate behavior. So I would think that to the extent that a tattoo would conflict with somebody from doing their job, I think that would be a hard question. I think Betty Knight specifically had this question, and when we did an HR thing, and she said, I don't understand how a tattoo would affect someone's job performance. And I'll tell you, there's it was an ADA thing. Customer preference was found in a case to not be enough of a legal reason for an employer to discharge an employee. And that was after an employee had cancer of the throat and they had a laryngectomy. So when they came back to work, the employer fired them and said, nobody wants to talk to you. So I would imagine that the tattoo is going to fall in that same type of category. I mean, right? If it's...
But one's a choice. The tattoo's a choice. The cancer is not.
I think we have to focus on the job responsibilities and the job requirements. Yeah. I know some employers have have successfully had requirements for how their employees look. They get around it by, I'm thinking of, the obvious, Hooters. Hang on, I'm being serious here. The way they get around that is they say it's I don't know. They've somehow made it, and I don't know the case. They've made. Yes, they've made it. That's what I thought it was. It's an entertainment. It's an entertainment thing. So it's like you're filling a role.
But if you have a person that has a tattoo on their face, you can make a note on that. You can just write no on the application.
If you can, what is it we say? You can fire and not fire for any reason as long as it's not an illegal reason. So every applicant
If I'm hiring
exactly.
somebody,
Yes.
I can just write no on the
Yeah.
application. Now, if I have an employee and they decide to go get the tattoo on their face, there's not a lot I can
Yeah.
do about that.
Probably not. Yeah. Okay. And your other question? I'm sorry.
Was required prayer during the day. If your office is open, say 8 to 4:30 or whatever it may be, but you have someone that is required to pray X amount of time, but you have X amount of hours, technically you can't discriminate on religion, but yet if they're required to pray during that time, that would be time that they would need to work.
Yeah.
How does the policy affect that situation?
I am not an expert. I will defer to Mark. What I would guess is you can't discriminate based on Title VII, and religion is a protected class. You're going to have to make an accommodation.
So the same thing would apply to tongue rings and nose rings?
Yeah. I think if you had somebody who, I don't know, they were in a customer-facing position, and now they were no longer able to be understood. When they spoke, you couldn't understand what they were saying. Now they're not able to meet one of the essential functions, I would imagine, of your job. But I don't know how many jobs require us all to be very good-looking. I would be fired. So, I mean, the job needs to be done.
But if you're interviewing them and you haven't hired them, that's just in your mind and you can do whatever.
Yes. Just as if somebody came in and they were slovenly dressed. Looked as if they hadn't showered in a couple of days. Yeah.
I have a question about the mental illness part. Because I had hired a gal. She had just lost a baby like 6 weeks before, and she was ready to get out in the workforce, and I interviewed her, and she seemed to interview wonderfully. It didn't work out that way. And she was very irrational and radical about things, and then started accusing different people in the office of doing different, saying or doing things, and they all swore to me they didn't do this. So, I had to fire her.
Right.
I had to let her go, but she was saying she wasn't coming, but.
So the question is about, well, how do you handle an employee with erratic behavior, someone that you suspect of having mental health issues? I'm going to throw this out to you guys because I think you should know the answer at this point. What's going to be something that you would point to that's going to help give you guidance? Their policies and your job descriptions, right? So if they're not able to do their job anymore, if they are, not meeting, at our work we have things that are called like, interpersonal skills that we need to meet. Those documents should be the foundation that you would build whatever case you would have to document that their work performance is not up to the standards that you have. And if you hire a good employee and they deteriorate, you can fire anybody for any reason as long as it's not illegal. Although if you've ever heard Betty Knight talk, yeah. Well, so what did I say before I started anything? What's the number one rule for any of these issues? Consult with legal and HR. I wish that everybody had a do not pass go policy. Never fire without consulting an attorney or your HR consultant. All right, and that's not always going to save you, but they might at least help you get your documents in a row so that you're able to take action when you need to take it. And then an attorney is going to tell you, be careful about your documentation because you don't want to, now I'm going to forget the word, fake it. But the lawyers have a nifty word for it. You don't want to put together, they've worked for you for 5 years and then suddenly in the past 8 days, they've been written up 8 times. That's going to be questionable, okay?
I have a question. Back to the very first one, you can't ask them if they're a U.S. citizen. Don't we still have to fill out an I-9 form before we hire someone?
Yeah, they have to provide proof that they can work legally in the United States.
But they're already hired at that point, correct?
I mean, that was,
Can't you ask if they are?
you can ask if they are, yeah, you can ask if they are legally able to work in the United States.
So some people could work here and have a green card.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Okay.